Tom Hamill. This is season 7, and I have an incredible guest here today, Ryan Thogmartin. We've quickly become friends. We met each other, at some big conference a while back, but this is the first time we got to sit down together and share. And so, Ryan, welcome. Thanks for being here. Thanks for saying yes. As we talk about navigating change in our life, which we all know everybody changed, but recently your family, you personally, you went through some changes. So set that up, and then we'll dialogue about some of the choices and the fallout and the surprises to that change.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. Listened to your podcast for a couple seasons since we became in proximity to each other. Now we're in physical proximity to each other, which is dope. So, change has been a season for us that's lasted a good solid 3 years. My wife and I say it's been a season of yes.
Okay.
Where God is calling us into different situations, and our responsibility is to say yes and show up and take those opportunities, which in itself creates a lot of change. But the biggest change that umbrellas all of it is our family moved from Zanesville, Ohio to Park City, Utah to Scottsdale, Arizona in the span of 2.5 years.
Yeah. Wow. It's been massive. You have 2 daughters.
I do. I have 2 daughters, 14 and 16. So we started this process when they were 12 and 14, which ideally is probably not the right time to move kids out of a formidable environment into another environment. But the fact that it was a formidable environment was one of the reasons we needed to seek more and follow what God was calling us to.
One of the things that's just like interesting about change when we talk about it retrospectively, like you're saying, hey, we moved. Okay, well, that's one short sentence, and it's like reading a book where you just turn the page and you don't realize like that was a 3-year process of getting from there to here, right? And so, let me ask you this question: how long had you been in that formidable environment before you made the change?
I had lived where we lived. My wife had never lived anywhere else. So for 30 plus years of her life, she was in the same place. I had been there for a little over 20 years. So,
so it's like all your kids.
That's all our kids knew was the house that we were in, and that their grandparents were across the street and their aunt was next door. And we kind of shared this 20-plus acre end of a cul-de-sac in the middle of the country.
Okay.
So it was, it was like Little House on the Prairie, kind of,
The thing that's interesting about change when it comes to all this, like some people move all the time. Maybe it's military kids, maybe it's, so I asked that question because if anybody's watching or listening, they're like, moving, that's no big deal.
Yeah.
Like, who cares, right? And so we look at people's change through our own lenses, right? And some people listening or watching would know this, that I was also born in Ohio, came from Ohio, moved to California, right? And so I have 2 daughters, you have 2 daughters. We're basically clones of each other.
We are. Yeah. We think alike, we talk alike, we look alike, kind of.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
right.
have cooler glasses than I do.
Well.
And more hair.
Just so everyone knows, right now I'm burning extra calories filtering about 18 different comments because I want to keep the rating on the podcast.
That's good. It's solid.
Yes,
matches my brand.
Yeah, right. So anyways, but when we're navigating change, it's amazing how we do the comparison game of going, your change is no big deal. I do that all the time. But for you and your kids, that was like life. I don't want to say shattering, but completely uprooting, right?
We obliviated what was normal to get really uncomfortable. And it was a long process. So probably 3 years prior to us starting that process of actually my wife and I getting aligned with the kids, that God was calling us somewhere else and we needed to step out and get uncomfortable. I had wanted to move. I felt a strong pulling on my heart that what we were building, where we were at, was coming to a place where for us to continue to build and grow, we needed to leave.
Yeah.
And my wife and I actually had a conversation in 2015 about moving. We were in a transition period with our business of either building or buying a large office space. Our team was growing, and it came down to, are we going to stay here forever, or do we think we're going to leave? If we think we're going to leave at some point, we'll go this route. If we're going to stay forever, we're going to buy this building and make it our own and spend some cash. And it was, yeah, I don't really ever see me leaving my parents, was what she said. Like this is all I've known, and I'm comfortable, and this is home. So we went a different route, and that all got blown up. And that was part of it. You own a business, you have a staff of 30 plus people. That factors into how you live your life. And then you throw the kids into the mix, and you throw family into the mix, and my family into the mix. For some people, that's, we stay somewhere 4 or 5 years and then we move, and that's normal.
Yeah.
This was unpacking an entire life, or should I say packing an entire life, putting it on a truck and going.
Just watching and listening to what you're talking about, this change, specifically moving from Ohio, right? This is like a 3-generation, multiple family impact, ripple effect of change, right? Your kids were obviously impacted. You were, your parents, your wife's parents, right? They're all impacted by this change, right? So,
wow, I've never looked at it that way. Yeah.
There's a 3-generational ripple effect of what that looks like. What I'm always fascinated by, probably because, and I talked about this in another episode this season, of like my own change and how similar our changes were. Of, you saw this change happening, you and your wife, like you just gave a date even, long before you ever went public and announced the change.
Yeah.
So if you can articulate it, which some of these things you're like, man, how do I articulate this? But what was the process or the moments where you started to, with a different lens, see it differently than the 3 generations, right? Because there's got to be a moment where you saw a change first. Your parents probably never saw this change.
No.
Your kids probably never were even in a spot to imagine the change.
Yeah.
So as that's being awakened in your heart, what does that look like? What's going through your mind? What was the things that were happening where you're like, whoa, this is starting to happen inside of me? Because the change happens in our hearts and our minds way before it's public.
Yeah, I can distinctly remember 2016. I took on a life coach and got into a mastermind and really started to focus on my own personal development. And as I started to grow, then I started to manifest and see things differently and really vision, like, where do I want to go with life? What do I feel God's calling me to? What is my purpose? And so internally, I started to have those feelings of like, can I get this in this environment? We were in a great environment. The environment we were in was supporting who we were and was shaping us and was shaping our kids. And, as I started to grow, my wife started in her own personal development journey as well. And so we were kind of growing side by side, but weren't really communicating well around. I wasn't communicating well around what was in my heart for change. Just I knew how big of a deal that would be with her family being around. My family was less of a factor in that. For me, I had been out of the house as soon as I could drive and kind of on my own. So
see, again, we're the same.
we are. We have a lot of similarities. And so I started to feel this change, and I distinctly remember my wife and I Kaylee had this, I had somewhat voiced it to her that, I feel like God may be calling us. I would love to move somewhere. We spent a lot of time traveling, and when we would travel, we always would ask, like, is this somewhere we could potentially live someday? Or would we like to have property here someday? But never did we picture not having something in Zanesville. Like, that was always kind of the home base nucleus. I remember one Sunday morning, we were streaming church, and I'm paying attention to the service, and I like kind of hear Kaylee sniffle, and I look over, and she is crying.
Okay.
And I'm like going, okay, this sermon isn't that good. Like, what is wrong? And
it must have been one of mine. If it wasn't that good.
It was a Tom Hamill special. And I looked at her, and I remember saying to her, like, what does matter? And she goes, we're supposed to move. And for me, it was like,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
amazing.
Finally.
And I said, what, really? And she goes, yeah, like, I'm realizing, I don't know what it is, but God is laying it on me. And she's like, I'm crying out of, it's sad because I didn't ever think that I would leave here. And so part of me is sad, but the other part of me is really excited because I know God's calling us to more. And so as we communicated more, we realized that we both were having a lot of the similar
Yeah.
feelings that we hadn't really communicated that. So my wife is someone of action, and I am the big dreamer and
Okay.
all of this. She's the fuel that kicks me into gear. And that day, she's like, go to Lowe's and buy boxes. And I went to Lowe's and Home Depot and bought as many plastic tubs as I could find.
Yeah.
And she literally just started packing. I'm like, where are we going? I don't know. When are we going? I don't know. And we had a meeting with the kids. I say meeting. We had a family gathering with our kids and said, hey, this is kind of what we feel God is calling us to. And my daughters are probably really mature for their age. I don't know where they get that from because I'm pretty immature a lot of times.
Their mom.
Definitely their mom.
Only because you and I are the same. That's where my girls would get it, is their mom. So
that is it. And my wife just laid out them. Look, do you feel it? Yes. The life that you want, is it here? No. Do you love people here? Yes. But we can love people from anywhere. And planes go everywhere every day. And luckily we had the freedom to make that decision. And so we seriously started praying, and it was a season where we had to commit to saying yes. And that's really when our yes season started. We knew that we had gotten really comfortable where we were at. And I feel like comfort is a driver of change.
Yeah.
Especially in my life. Anytime in my life where I've gotten comfortable, I get complacent when I get really comfortable.
Yeah.
And I have to make some sort of drastic move. My wife says that she knows when I want to make a large purchase that I've gotten comfortable. Because when I make a large purchase, I will stretch us financially to make that purchase to where it forces me to take the next step.
Hey, wanted to take a quick break from the podcast to let you know The Life You're Meant to Lead, #1 new release on Amazon, is available both in the ebook, right? Kindle, Audible, where I read it, and the tree version. Make sure you pick it up. It's available anywhere in the world, so you can go to your country's Amazon if you're listening or watching from somewhere else. Pick it up. The Life You're Meant to Lead by Tom Hamill. You know what's fascinating about us as human beings is that we are always striving for comfort, right? Like, we want easy street. So, we think, how automated can our life be? How can we remove having to make choices from our life? Like, that's what we're always striving for. And yet it's the tension that happens through change that actually produces growth.
Yeah, that's good.
And so while we strive for comfort, I mean, this has been true for me. Every time I've gotten comfortable in a job, I'm like, oh, it's time to go now. Like, literally, I've been building the systems and structures so that this thing will run itself. And now that I'm here, oh, dang it, now it's time to change again. And so you just kind of go on. You brought out a couple of things that I wanted to circle back on that I just think is so fascinating with navigating through change. And again, the reason I said this before we came on the show, that the reason we're having this conversation is to help anybody that is currently going through a season of change, which we all face as human beings. But one thing you were talking about, when you looked over, you saw your wife crying, and I was just thinking about, it is always the season of change where joy and sadness or grief coexist simultaneously, right? Because it's the grief of, what does life look like when I'm not living across the street from my parents? What does life look like when my kids maybe isn't having Christmas or Thanksgiving dinner, or Easter? What do you feel? Whatever those major events are. We don't do it so much here on the West Coast, but in the Midwest, we did a lot. Family reunion. I can't even tell you the last time I went to my family's family reunion, just because of like, I can't get there, and kids are traveling, and my schedule, whatever. And so you're like, we can't just drive down the street to do that kind of a thing. And so there is a grief, there is a sadness, and simultaneously the joy, the excitement, the anticipation of like, yes, but we're going to embrace something new and wonderful, right? And so this idea of experiencing almost like a bipolar syndrome, if you will, of that, and just how fascinating that season is in our life? It's not really a question. I just wanted to point
No,
that
well,
out.
no, yeah,
Like,
I will fully agree. There were markers through the journey of just that, where there were extreme highs and extreme lows, and they may be 5 minutes apart.
yeah,
They may be 5 days apart, weeks apart, but there were extreme highs and extreme lows through the whole process. Part of our process was hooking up a camper and going up and down the East Coast and trying different cities where, like, maybe it would be cool to live here.
yeah.
There were moments where we would pull into town. We were in one town less than 5 minutes, and my wife's like, "This isn't it."
You noped out
And
of there.
we noped and typed in the address for a different state, and we took off.
Yeah.
So there were extreme highs and lows. There was sadness. There was joy. I'll say this, like, probably the saddest part was thinking about the family dynamic and, missing nieces and nephew ball games and first days of school. And, like today, my wife was up at 4:30 on FaceTime for my nephew's first day of preschool.
Yeah,
And, like,
yeah.
there's those moments that you go, I don't know how I would live if I missed all of these things. But that was probably the biggest, the nucleus at the middle for my wife, was that connectivity to family. The quality over the quantity,
Yeah.
is a real thing. Like, when we're together, we were just in Ohio this past weekend for 72 hours.
Yeah.
The whole 72 hours is great because we haven't seen each other for months. So it isn't, we don't see each other every single day, but we see each other when we need to see each
Yeah.
other, and it's
And how
it's
much
a
more
quality over
richer,
time.
more
Yeah.
valuable, more
Yes.
impacting those moments are. One
Yeah.
one of the things that um, I'll just blurt this out there because I don't really know how to articulate this, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but we were around a group of people, some family, some friends, some coworkers, and you're just like, oh, because I'm looking at life with a different lens, I realize you are no longer on the same frequency as me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And to realize somebody is seeing and processing life differently, not that we were by any means better or
Right.
looking down on them of
Right.
like, oh, I see it from such a better perspective than you. It's just like, oh, I see it from a different perspective
Yeah.
than you. And so then where we got frustrated was, since you don't see it from our lens, nothing I tell you about why I'm making this change will ever make sense to you,
Mm-hmm.
because you just are looking at everything through a different lens. And so part of why we made some of our change was those individuals who, again, friends, family, dear friends, were just like, oh, you are in a different frequency, and I can't get to where I'm going in this
Mm-hmm.
lane or in this frequency. And so it's just this weird thing of like, you don't mean that arrogantly or cocky or pridefully. You're just going, oh, I just see it differently. And I bring that up because I'm like, I feel like going through our change, the thing that has been really powerful is trying to explain that to people and giving them permission
Mm-hmm.
to say, hey, you're not abandoning those people. You're not saying you're better than those people. Like, every time I've talked with you, I've never ever heard you go, we're so much better than our family we left in Ohio. We
That's
had to
right.
get out of there.
That's right.
It's never been that way. It's just we just started to think differently and saw our lives differently.
Yeah.
And so we were never going to become the people we saw. And I just want to say I'm proud of you.
Hey, thank you.
Like,
you.
I don't mean that condescendingly, but I just, having done it, like, I know
Yeah.
how difficult that is. And you go, man, you'll never understand why we're moving to Park City or Arizona or anywhere else that you would go, because their frequency is
Yep.
that community and that block and that cul-de-sac in Ohio.
Yeah. No, it's real. That's real. And there's some that are going to celebrate it with you.
Yeah.
And I don't get it, but man, we're going to support you, and we're going to want the best for you and help you and come alongside you in your journey. And so we called those our celebrators and elevators, and we learned to protect our happiness. We knew that there were groups that we couldn't share the news with, and we were never going to see eye to eye.
Yeah.
And it would just suck the life out of the situation. And then we kind of doubled down on our celebrators and elevators, and the people that got it, or they didn't fully get it, but they supported it because they knew that we weren't doing it selfishly or, like you said, because we were better. And we had to really have a deep conversation with our kids about that. Like, we're not better than anybody else. God's just calling us to something different.
Yeah.
But what it's unlocked, like the cool thing that it, in the people that were close to us, it's almost like given permission of, maybe God's calling us to something bigger too. And how do we tap into that? And I see how your life has changed
Yeah.
for the better. So, yes, there's been a lot of parts of that season that have been extremely difficult, and like you're just like, why, God? Like,
Yeah.
if this was the plan, why is it got to be so difficult? But now being on the other side of it, the blessing that's come through the resistance, and they're going, wait a second, if you can do it, I can do it.
Sure.
If you can take a risk or take a chance, and it isn't necessarily moving across the country. It may be leaving a job. It may be changing a school. It may be building a house in the
It
same
might be
community.
starting school.
It might absolutely.
go take those college classes.
That's right. It might absolutely. I mean, our kids started a completely different school in the middle of us.
Sure, yeah.
Like, we went from traditional homeschool to Valor Global Online, which was great. So like, you get in a season of yes, and committing to be uncomfortable, the doors that open and the opportunities that you see, you're filtering everything through a different lens in that season.
I think we all go through, if there's any Bible believers or readers or people who understand the history of the Bible, we go through what the children of Israel did, where they left Egypt, and when a few things got hard, they were still like, would it just be easier to go back to Egypt?
Yeah.
Right? Would it just be easier to go back? Like, I understood that. I knew how to make that work. I'm stepping into this unknown that I don't know how to make work, because you're learning it, right? This is the first time you've done whatever this is, right?
Yeah.
That sort of thing. And so, have you at any point, or how have you processed, like, would it just be easier to go back to what I know?
Oh, we had that conversation. I distinctly remember in Park City, we thought Park City was where God was calling us. We were there for 10 months. Nothing moved. Every door slammed. And we had a connection in Scottsdale. God opened a few doors, and it's like, okay, God, if that's where you're calling us, we're going to start stepping. In we got 78 no's on rental properties that we called. And I remember distinctly being in the kitchen in Park City, and we slammed the laptop shut and said, okay, maybe Scottsdale's not what God wants, and we're supposed to go back to Ohio. And this was a good 10 months that got us through COVID, because we could be outside and, be in the mountains and do our thing. Maybe we figured out life really well, the four of us. Maybe that's the whole purpose of this. And we went to bed, and we slept on that for 48 hours. And out of nowhere, we got a call from a realtor that one of the properties we wanted was available again. And like, that door opened. But yeah, we've had plenty of moments where it was like, was this stupid? Like, was this the devil and not God?
Yeah.
But we got really good advice from a pastor, and we asked this question so many times in the first, I'm going to say, year and a half. Like, how do we know? And our daughters challenged us on this. How do you know it's God that's calling you to move, and this isn't the devil playing a trick on us? I had no idea how to answer that question, and neither did my wife. And we prayed about it, and I think we threw together. I don't even remember what the answers were that we gave, but I know now they weren't the correct answers.
Okay.
And we met a pastor, and we asked him that question, and he gave us the most basic, easy to understand definition. And he said, if your decisions are taking you closer to God, then it's God. If it's forcing you to rely solely on yourself, where you almost don't need God, then it's not God. If it's pulling you away from him, it's not him. If it's pulling you closer to him, it's him.
Yeah.
And that was the confirmation that we needed, and we had that conversation with our girls, and we asked, do you feel like this is forcing us as a family to rely more on God and get closer to him? And the kids were like, oh, absolutely. And the people that we're meeting and the community that we're getting plugged into. And my wife and I thought that we were getting the kids into a different environment, and that's why we were doing this. And we realized the community that we were absolutely seeking.
Yeah.
We didn't know it until we found it,
Sure.
that's what we needed.
Yeah.
And so as you're navigating change, it could be easy to get confused on, like, okay, yeah, maybe this isn't the right thing. And we had plenty of conversations like that. But every time we did, God called us to step a little bit more.
Yeah.
And we sat in a limbo season for a while of just, okay, God, where are we supposed to go? We're just going to chill here. And, you let us know, lay out the plan with the red carpet, and then we'll go.
Yeah.
And we wrestled with that for a while in a season of unrest, and it was conflictual. A lot of relationships were stressed, and we knew we needed to go. And it wasn't until we finally started just taking steps of faith that doors started to open, and the next step was revealed. The next step was revealed.
So good. Man, so many things that we've unpacked that I just want to try to summarize our conversation here. Like, okay, so we talked about the generational ripple effect of choices and changes, right? And so just for anybody that's watching or listening and they're going through a season of change, that the reality is both good and bad, there's going to be a ripple effect of any choice change. And it can be, and again, I don't want to compare change. It can be moving across the country to starting that community college course to investing in the stock market. I mean, right? Like, hey, you're just going to do things different than you have done. There's going to be a ripple effect. Some are more prominent or more immediately seen than others, but there's a ripple effect. There's a season of doubt where it just would be easier to go back to the pre-change you because you know how to do that, right? And in that season of doubt, knowing the change you're moving to is going to stretch you, grow you, right? That sort of thing. Whereas, I don't think, change for the sake of change doesn't do anything, but change for the sake of growth, maturing, developing, right? That's the change we're supposed to be leading towards.
That's right.
And honestly, going back to what we already know is the comfort, like to lull ourselves to sleep, right? So there's that change. And then there's the surprise and the gift of change, right? The stuff that you can't even see yet that is the result of this change. It's getting clearer as you walk into that change, right? It's kind of like a street sign. You can't read the street sign from far away, but as you continue that momentum in that direction, you start to see the speed limit and the exit signs, all those kinds of things. And that literally as you're walking through change. And I just want to say this one thing too, because the thing that your story is so powerful, we always just kind of assume change is immediate. And the change you've been in, and in this case, and maybe there's somebody watching or listening that's been even longer, we're sitting here today, we're talking about a 3-year change process, right?
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
That sometimes even when we make the decision to change, we don't even know how long that change season will be.
Yeah.
And so I would just encourage anybody, stay on the journey and the path of the change you're destined to be.
That's it.
Right? Stay on that because you don't know the community and the frequency and the place and the growth and the surprise and the gift that your change really will bring to you. Because you don't fully know your future self yet. They're calling you, they're drawing you, like, come this way, you're going to be so much better. And so I would just say, stay on the course of change. Ryan, thanks for being my guest today,
Thanks
man.
for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks
This
for
is
this
awesome.
conversation. Hey, thanks for listening and watching Cultivation Podcast. You can check out this episode and all of our episodes on our website, ourcultivatedlives.com, or check us out on all the social media platforms. You get the last say. How do we find you? Where do we follow you? Where should we check you out and connect with you? Anywhere at?
Easy. At Ryan Thogmartin on any platform.
We will put that in the show links so that you can follow him, check him out, all of his content. It's incredible. Again, thanks for being our guest.
Thanks, Tom.
Thanks for checking out this week's episode. Be sure to hit the like button as well as make your comments in the comment section. We'd love to hear from you and journey with you. Also, hit the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on all the other incredible content we have coming at you.